This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KBNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Well, Joe Biden now has a budget plan, and it sure seems to be mirroring Donald Trump's plan over the last 4 years and when he was a candidate. A few months back, we had on retired General Robert Spalding featuring his book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. And it was a great interview, and I think this one will be just as important with Jonna Bianco. She's with the American Bondholders Foundation. And, you know, she alludes to the fact in her pitch to talk about this to Americans. China owes U.S. bondholders just under $2 trillion, okay? From the 1900s, never paid back a penny. I mean, you go back over the last century, how much they owe us, the collusion, the copyright infringement, the trademark and patent infringement. We hear it nonstop. Jonna, how are you this morning? I'm so glad you're on this topic and have been writing opinion editorials. It's very timely and important.
Well, thank you. The American Bondholders Foundation has been pushing this issue now for 20 years, and thank God for President Donald J. Trump, who gets it, who sees it, is trying to hold China accountable and level the playing field of what you just described as while the elite slept, China has pretty much taken over.
Do you feel that the American public, and I'm sure you're not polling this week, and I'm sure you don't have all the scientific data, I don't think anybody does, but you can get a glimpse, you can make an educated guess on what ABF, the American Bondholders Foundation, what your colleagues, what folks like me at the regional level with talk shows are doing, spreading the word, reporting the news and saying, hey, everybody, hey, listener, hey, reader, you be the decider. But here's the real story, thank you, Paul Harvey, here's the rest of the story about what's happening. Do you think they get it? Or would you think that it's going to be an education process that's going to be ongoing and unfolding into the next few years?
Oh, no, I think the American people get it clearly. And Wall Street gets it clearly. The globalists, the elite gets it clearly. Mainstream America gets it clearly. And they're questioning, why isn't anything done? Why are they allowing this to happen? American tax dollars pay China $72 million a day in interest on Chinese-held U.S. treasuries, and yet we hold the very same treasuries that China defaulted on, over $1.6 trillion worth. Why can that not be used to extinguish America's debt, paying China with their own paper, extinguish that debt, save that $72 million? Do you realize the difference that would make in our states and our infrastructure for law enforcement funding, fire department funding, economic stimulus to start getting back some of the ungodly damages, not to mention the tragic loss of life caused by the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, and they're not alone. I mean, if you look at North Korea, they have survived thanks to China exclusively, in that another horrific country, not the people, not the culture, the leadership. Kim Jong-un and his dad and his grandfather who started it all. Larry Kudlow was on Laura Ingraham on Fox News, and folks, you can check this out, courtesy of Fox News, foxnews.com, and he talked about the fact, as an economist and as a budget guru, that China really isn't trusted.
That we learned, not the only country, other countries, but the United States learned that China is not to be trusted, period, full stop. And that we cannot rely on these long, complicated supply chains coming out of China. I think you'll see the whole business community. You'll see business school professors saying, now the supply chains don't work, we've got to bring them back home because China is not reliable. They're not the only ones who are unreliable. But I hear the same thing from people around the world.
Yep, and that's Larry Kudlow, and that's last night on Laura Ingraham on Fox News. So this is quite relevant. And as we inch into elections across the nation, I have an ad agency. My day job is helping candidates primarily. That's our niche, and Republican candidates, obviously. And so whether at the federal level or at the state level or at a city level, it's hot and heavy right now for Alaska, particularly, where one of the biggest states we're helping candidates in August. And so there's a lot of candidates we have that are eyeing how do we differentiate ourselves in a state threshold and measure to when you juxtapose and compare to a Democrat at a national level. The big day is going to be in November. And so as you write your thoughts and get them published across the nation, and international markets hopefully read your thoughts and your organization and colleagues' thoughts, do you see momentum for Trump because of all of us supporting him and because of education? Do you see the poll results changing sooner than later? Because the results right now show that Biden's ahead in almost every poll. Does that concern you?
It does concern me because the American people expect results. They're tired of committees. They're tired of reviews. They're tired of, I listened to President Donald J. Trump give a speech a few weeks ago in the Rose Garden with respect to the massive violations and autonomy in Hong Kong and the abuses of China. The COVID-19 situation of the Wuhan virus that we know China lied about. He went on to talk about the massive amounts of intellectual property theft, the trillions of dollars in economic loss in this country, and the job loss. And yet he creates a committee. That committee goes to Steve Mnuchin. They get back with them in 60, 90 days, and then they review it, and nothing ever happens. And the American people are saying, where's the action? This is not complicated. Do you remember the drug program that Nancy Reagan put together, God bless her, that the comment, just say no?
Of course.
Right now, America just needs to say no to China. Cut them off of our capital markets. They can't function without the dollars. They can't go around the world buying allies of corrupt politicians in foreign countries and buying allies to be aggressive against the United States. Take them off of our markets. Collect the money that is owed. Reduce our debt. Use that money to build America, to bring back our pharmaceutical supplies chains and manufacturing. But it takes action, action, action. No more talk. No more putting committees together. No more, well, let's let Congress look at it, or the House or the Senate, or we're reviewing this. In the meantime, China is consuming this country. We've seen what they've done by the indoctrination into Confucius institutes of indoctrinating our youth, our college students, the future of this country, turning them to socialists, communists, to hate their own country, denying the freedoms, breaking down our Constitution. At the end of the day, that all takes money. You control the money. We've seen their continued currency manipulation go on. That was one thing that finally I thought progress was being made prior to the signing of the Phase 1, which I call Phase 9 trade deal, because they're not going to uphold it. It's very clear and evident. When they actually labeled China a currency manipulator. Well, that went off the table under the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal. It needs to be brought back. And at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. And if Donald J. Trump does not get tough on China, which is what America wants, we already know Beijing Biden is not going to be tough on China. But Donald Trump needs to create action, action, action. The American people want to see it. Banning the bad guys from traveling to the U.S., that doesn't benefit the American people. They're looking around because they don't have a job, and they're losing their homes, and law enforcement budgets are getting cut. Our bridges and airports and roads and infrastructure are falling apart, and yet China's is building massive cities and massive military bases in the South China Seas inappropriately to go against the United States. And America is looking at Donald Trump, supposed to be a law and order president, supposed to be a leader, saying, what are you doing?
Yeah,
they expect action, action, action.
Agreed. And I encourage you, we're about to slip into a break and we'll be right back with Jonna. I encourage you, if you have not read Stealth War, Jonna, to read it. You will thank me. If you don't have time and you're traveling a lot with your busy work schedule, get the audio book like I did, General Spalding, Robert Spalding, and it is brilliant. He covers everything, and it'll be good. If you haven't read it, it's a new book, and it would be great talking points to intertwine with all your other economic elements here that really Americans need to know about. So when we come back, we'll talk more with Jonna Bianco with the American Bondholders Foundation. You heard the numbers, folks. The U.S. has been paying $72 million in interest payments to China for our debt daily. Get your brain around that one. We're going to come back. I'll give a couple stories dealing with China. I'm sure Jonna will have some too. I'll tell you about my trip to Taiwan as a state representative as well, and how hungry they are to affiliate with America. Same with Hong Kong. Stay with us. Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
We are back with Jonna Bianco of American Bondholders Foundation, and we're talking about China, and essentially with Joe Biden, who will be the Democratic nominee, even though they haven't had their convention. We all know this. And whether you think he has dementia or he's just old or his policies are antiquated or they're just in error, suddenly now his narrative, as of literally over the last day, so again, this is timely to have Jonna on, Biden's narrative is, hey, I want to bring jobs back to America. I want to help the middle class. I want to build up morale. I want to make sure that foreign governments who owe us pay us back. Kellyanne Conway, spokesperson for President Trump, said, sir, are you China? Not like Jonna said, Beijing, Biden. I mean, you literally plagiarized our talking points and how President Trump won the first time and has been delivering. And so, Jonna, do you find that very hypocritical of Joe Biden to just totally take from our team's playbook and say, I'm going to do all these things that Trump's already doing?
Absolutely. And of course, we all know that it's just talk, it's just rhetoric. If you look at the history of the Democrats, their affiliation to the Chinese Communist Party, go back to during the Clinton days. I mean, the reason we got sold out of our pharmaceutical supply chains was over an executive order. In fact, this was in Forbes just recently in the past couple of months. Bill Clinton, as president, signed an executive order taking away all of the programs, all of the tax incentives for all the generic and pharmaceutical industry, which at the time had been being manufactured in a U.S. territory in Puerto Rico. And that's what moved it all over to China to begin with. You talk about a serious national security concern, but again, the Democrats are in bed with the Chinese. They're in bed with the socialism, the progressiveness, the Marxism. At the end of the day, they should call it what it is, communism. It's just political rhetoric. We all know the history. Over 40 years with Joe Biden, Beijing Biden. Look at the Clinton situation. Look at the Nancy Pelosi situation. It's all down that path. And it's just they actually stole the playbook from Donald J. Trump.
You know, when I interviewed, and I only bring up this again because it's apropos to our dialogue here and the narrative that you and I both concur with, which is be careful with China and keep them at arm's length and bring everything as much as possible from semiconductors to pharmaceuticals back to the United States. You know, in Alaska, rare earth minerals, Spalding talks about that and how dependent we are on China for some of those. And it's everything from our smartphone build to, believe it or not, ballistic missiles and weaponry that the United States relies on to defend itself. It's quite unnerving to think that we're tethered to China in any respect. But as a lawmaker, I remember how anxious the nation of Taiwan, who China says that's ours like Hong Kong is, and they're Chinese, they're not Taiwanese. And Taiwan says, no, we're independent, we're our own nation, and they're very Western friendly. And they're like the Philippines, my wife's Filipina, they're very, very pro-United States in Taiwan. Now we see, and you referenced Hong Kong, and the same problem where China is coming in more and more and more. It's not a creep factor anymore. They've completely come in. And if you've read over just the recent weeks in July and late June, you don't see as many protests because democracy and freedom is gone. England is gone, UK is gone, China's in, it's communism. And like you say, the suppression is extreme. And my one story is that I remember in Hawaii a couple of years ago, I'm there and getting an Uber driver, and we're talking to Chinese, and we're talking about the difficulties in government between the United States and China and the differences in religious expression and freedom or lack thereof. And he actually cried when he talked about sending his dad a Bible, and his dad was imprisoned. And now he's on a wanted list. And we're thinking, this is an Uber driver in Honolulu. We're trying to be lighthearted. But I mean, I cried with him too a little bit, because it was like, good Lord, all because you sent a Bible to China? True story. I mean, assuming he was telling the truth. Those are horrible stories. And does it make you shudder to even hear that? And not just my story, but others of the Taiwanese subjugation, the Hong Kong subjugation, the Uyghurs, whether someone's a fan of Muslims or not. I mean, if someone's a simple Muslim, peaceful, and they're enslaved, China's rampant across the board.
Absolutely, they are. We've seen it over and over, not only in the human rights violations with the Uyghurs, but we've seen it with their own citizenry. We've seen it in the Christian community, the Judeo-Christian community, where they burned down churches and imprisoned people for preaching the word of God. That is China. That is communism. That is the Chinese Communist Party. And they pull no bones about it. They are in your face, out in the open, do not care. It is their way or the highway. And until this president and this country recognizes that and realizes that and puts a stop to it, it will continue. And we're seeing that play out in our own country today. And we have got to decouple. America just celebrated its independence. We need to now celebrate becoming independent from China, bring back our manufacturing, get our steel mills going, get our computer chip factories going, get our pharmaceutical supply industry going, and completely isolate and separate ourselves from China so that we're not dependent on China whatsoever. It is a very serious national security concern all the way across the board.
Sure. And, I look at like Mitch McConnell. You are thoughtful, and you're obviously highly intelligent, and you're educated on this topic. So you're able to encompass kind of the complete perspective. But I will add in, you mentioned foreign governments and their connection to China, and you touched on, but I'll add to that, United States leadership's connection. Forget the Democrats, Mitch McConnell, his wife Elaine Chao. I mean, the Chinese connection, and I don't mean the Bruce Lee movie, the Chinese connection and entanglement with Washington, D.C. and the deep state, dare I say, and rich folks and people of power and prominence on both sides of the spectrum is really unnerving. And I don't think there's a sinister plot. I just think, Jonna, that it's greed. And people get into a rut of, yep, we work with China. We have a business with them. We agree with Jonna and Tom and the American public that are skeptical and General Spalding. But we also make a lot of money from it, and we're not fans of communism. We're patriots, red, white, and blue. But we're not going to cancel these contracts, even if we don't like China, because it's about the money. That's what you would hear if you read someone's mind. You're not going to hear it outwardly.
Very self-serving, is it not?
Yep, it is.
When they're in positions of leadership and they've allowed the infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party within our government, within every aspect of our government, city, state, local, federal government, at the highest levels. We're seeing that in our colleges. It is very self-serving. It's like, they could care less of the bigger picture as long as they're getting their pockets stuffed with cash.
Nope,
and that's
agreed.
what we see on Wall Street. That's what we've seen with corporate America. That's how we got sold out to begin with. Because they didn't look at the bigger picture and the long-term ramifications of the Chinese Communist Party.
We're talking with Jonna Bianco. I tell you, she is an all-star, and she's with American Bondholders Foundation. Someone just called, and we weren't taking questions, Jonna, because I wanted to hog you for myself and ask these questions exclusively, but someone wrote in, and we said we'd take him. Why would Colin Powell, I know you can't speak for him, but why would retired four-star General Colin Powell support Biden? Has he always been a lefty?
Well, no, but look, here's the scoop. What you have is, and the former head of Blackwater said it best the other day when he was on Laura Ingram's show. What you have is heads of the military leave the top of the military, And then they go over to the war complex, to the industrial complex, and they take jobs on heads of boards and committees as senior advisors or consultants, and they make their money by continuing to keep the war machine going. Donald J. Trump is a threat to that in wanting to shut those things down, bring our troops back home, hold other countries accountable to defend themselves. And they're always looking for that next label, that next title, that next position, that next contract. Again, it goes to self-serving greed is all it is. And they'll go to the side that's going to give them the best deal. And Joe Biden must have promised them something greater than what he thought he could have got from the Donald J. Trump side of the aisle.
Which is so
and that's
disappointing.
The problem. That is the swamp
Yep.
that needs drained and needs stopped.
It's disappointing. And you know what? Without Trump, you're going to see we're back tethered to Iran. You're going to see back to the Paris Climate Accord. You're going to see our embassy moved in Israel. It would be a nightmare. Jonna Bianco is her name, American Bondholders Foundation. You can follow her there. Jonna, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
God bless you, my friend. It's the Tom Anderson Show.